I note that you have yet to receive a request to investigate the extremely serious allegations made by the Daily Telegraph against George Galloway, MP. Since serving in the last Gulf War in 1991, I have been very interested in the situation in Iraq ever since. I apologise for his English. He is a soldier. For a couple of years, I nearly left school at 17 like you to go and work in a factory. For a public school education.
Get on with it.
Listen, no wonder he wants to draw a veil over this English which is now enshrined forever in the history of this Parliament. Since serving in the last Gulf War, I can't resist reading it again. For a couple of years, I was on the board of Anne Clwyd's organisation, Indict, and there met a lot of Iraqi opposition figures. Now, there are many new members in the House, Mr. Speaker, so let me tell them about the organisation, Indict. Indict was a political campaign to indict the former leaders of Iraq. It was foreign funded. It was funded to the tune of millions of dollars by the United States government.
That's all right then.
That's all right then, as the honourable member says. It was funded to the tune of millions of dollars from the United States government. The complainant was a member of it. There he met a lot of Iraqi opposition figures. It operated from this House. Parliamentary facilities, I surmise, were used by its members. Their offices were used. Their telephones were used. I don't know if the computer was invented then, but perhaps their faxes, if they were invented then, were used. And perfectly properly, because these were honourable members of Parliament engaged in a political campaign which happened to be foreign funded to the tune of millions of dollars. I'm more interested in the Iraqi opposition figures that the honourable member met therein. Who might those Iraqi opposition figures have been? Let's speculate. Let's speculate.
Just for the clarification of the House, when I was a member of the Board of Indict, we actually had premises down South Lambeth somewhere, I can't remember exactly where they were, and it was not, as stated.
It's not a point of order. I say to the honourable gentleman that this is a matter for debate, and it might catch my eye later on, sometime later by the sound of it.
His verbal facility is not even as good as his written facility. The campaign, undoubtedly, I don't know why you would want to deny it. Everybody in here knows that members of Parliament use parliamentary resources for political campaigns. My honourable friend, the member for Wolverhampton, whom I respect very much, sent me a document this week in the internal post, with every word of which I agree and which I wholeheartedly support, the campaign against academies, against city academies. I hope I haven't put him in trouble. Everybody in here knows that every member who's involved in a political campaign uses parliamentary facilities in part, whether they've got an office in South Lambeth somewhere or not. Well, the honourable member says we didn't. Are we really expected to believe that he never once used the telephone, the photocopier, a meeting room, his own office, in pursuit of his The honourable lady shakes her head. That's even more extraordinary. She was the chairman of Indict. I'll let her in, of course, in a minute. I will let her in, of course, in a minute. If she's going to claim now that Indict never once used parliamentary facilities, then I will risk being named by you, Mr. Speaker, because no one in their right mind could believe that the campaign the honourable lady led for years, ever once used parliamentary facilities in pursuit of its objectives. I'll let her in.
Mr. Speaker, I simply want to put the record straight. Indite was an organisation, yes, funded, not just by the Americans, but also by other countries. Indite employed people. It employed 6 people, sometimes 7 people, full-time people. It had an office directly across the river. That office was staffed throughout the time it was run. That was over a 7-year period. So I would ask the honourable gentleman not to repeat that untruth. It was not run from the House of Commons.
Well, I'm more grateful for that intervention than she can imagine. It now turns out that the organisation of which the complainant was a member was funded not by one foreign country, but by several foreign countries, so handsomely that they could afford to employ 7 people and have an office just across the river. How extraordinary that is. I will have...
Order. I know it's difficult for the honourable gentleman's frowning, but I've got a difficult job this evening. And I say to the honourable gentleman, is that it's one thing mentioning an organisation in the passing, but he's now entering into a full-blown debate about this particular organisation, and we should get back to this report.
Mr. Speaker, it's about standards. It's about the fact that I'm being thrown out of the House for running a campaign about Iraq, which sometimes used parliamentary facilities and was funded by foreigners. And it's based on a complaint by a member of an organisation which campaigned about Iraq, which undoubtedly used from time to time some parliamentary facilities and was funded by not one but several foreign countries. That's my point, Mr. Speaker. It's the double standards in this that give rise to the injustice. And I hadn't intended to spend as much time on the organisation Indite, except the 2 members of it have intervened and have expanded that which I had to say on this subject. My real point, as I was turning to say before the Honourable Lady intervened, my real point is not about Indite, but about the Iraqi opposition figures that the Honourable Member from Blaby was hanging out with during his time across the river in Lambeth with the Honourable Lady and Indite. Let's speculate on who these Iraqi opposition figures might be. Might they be the Iraqi opposition figures that put us into so much trouble in the run-up to the war? Might they be the Iraqi opposition figures who fabricated and forged their way into here and into the White House and into the Congress and into Whitehall with their canards which have led us to this pass that we're in, that we can't avoid discussing this evening? Might they be the Iraqi opposition figures?
I'm going to do it again. I know it's difficult for the honourable gentleman to take a telling, but he must go back to the report. He's entering into the detail of an organisation called Indite, and he's not allowed to do so. I tell him he's not allowed to do so, and he must obey my ruling.
So you keep saying, and you keep having told me you'd protect me. We're now getting to the stage where you're going to have to throw me out of Parliament prematurely because I'm... Mr. Speaker...
Order. I name Mr. George Galloway.
I beg to move that George Galloway be suspended from the service of the House.
The question is that Mr. George Galloway be suspended from the service of the House. Many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order.
I'll give my speech outside for anyone who wants to hear it.
There's no voices can't be heard.